Good afternoon, and welcome to our session on the implementation of ICN work product. This is where the proverbial rubber meets the road. I'm Randy Tritell from the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, and I'm delighted to be moderating this excellent panel. Well, during the course of the conference, you'll be treated to many informative, thought-provoking sessions on a full range of competition enforcement and policy issues. And the ICN's work in many areas often results in a work product that's designed to help agencies conduct their investigations and analyze transactions and conduct, among other things. But this session is unique because we will focus on the way in which ICN agencies actually use their materials to improve agencies' processes, analyses, and ultimately outcomes, as well as use by others, such as academics. So we will be treated to hearing from several agencies as to how they used the ICN's work, injected it into their agency's bloodstreams, and how that work helped them in practical and meaningful ways. We hope that all agencies can benefit from this, perhaps by adapting the specific examples that you will hear, but in any case, from being reminded that the ICN has a vast amount of materials, all available on the ICN's website, to help agencies accomplish their missions most effectively. So let me now take a moment to briefly introduce our panelists in the order in which they will present. Well, first, we'll hear from Viviana Blanco Barboza, President of the Commission to Promote Competition of Costa Rica, or COPROCOM. Then we will hear from David Miller, Executive Director of the Jamaica Fair Trading Commission. Our next panelist will be Parret Muteto, Chief Analyst of the Zambia Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. And finally, we'll hear an NGA perspective from Dr. Mary Catherine Lucey, Associate Professor at University College Dublin's Sutherland School of Law, where she is also the director of the university's Center for the Common Law in Europe. Well, as in previous years, as some of you may recall, our work is always inspired by the upcoming conference host's cultures, as expressed in its proverbs. So during this session, I will share some of those inspirations. In fact, I'll start with one that particularly resonated with me. Schriepswort, waarwoord. Means basically, proverbs never lie. So let's start with you, Viviana. I'm interested to hear your experience because I was a bit confused by how two German proverbs apply to the situation of a young agency. On the one hand, we learn that die wildensten Fohlen werden die besten Pferde. The wilder the colt, the better the horse. But another teaches that was hilft laufen, wenn man nicht auf den rechten Weg ist. Speed gets you nowhere if you're headed in the wrong direction. So what is the right course for a young agency? And how can the ICN help them to get there?
Thank you very much, and well, thanks for inviting me to share the experience of the Commission to Promote Competition in Costa Rica in the ICN. And 2 years ago, Costa Rica approved a new competition law which integrally amends the regulatory framework for competition policy in line with the best international practices. As a result of this reform, COPROCOM has developed a comprehensive implementation plan of the law based on 3 pillars: regulatory strengthening, institutional reinforcement, and effective application of competition rules. In this process, we have taken advantage of all the resources provided by the ICN in order to better implement and enforce this new competition law. In particular, there are some ICN's products that have been very useful for us. First, COPROCOM has actively been involved in the ICN Bridging Project, which has allowed us to engage with the network with added confidence. The fact that we are participated hand in hand with the Federal Economic Competition Commission of Mexico, COFECE, as our partner, allow us to get involved more effectively. And I consider COFECE as a facilitator and promoter of our participation within the ICN's different activities. Second, COPROCOM has benefited from the technical support provided by the ICN and several competition agencies with greater experience, like FTC, DOJ, or COFECE, which has allowed us to implement this new legislation in terms of the preparation and adoption of guidelines, manuals, and other instruments. In this context, the products of the working groups have enabled us to upgrade our employees' skills and techniques in topics related to mergers, cartels, unilateral conducts, and advocacy. They have also guided us on how to prioritize the cases inside the agency, implement ex-post assessments of our resolutions, and monitor both the effectiveness and efficiency of the agency. Also, the ICN Training on Demand project is an important tool for small agencies like COPROCOM, as it gives us the possibility to train our professionals in a virtual way on competition topics. Some of our collaborators have had a very rewarding experience using these resources. Now that the implementation of the recent competition reform in Costa Rica has introduced several new topics, our professionals are in need of highly specialized training in matters such as leniency programs, investigation techniques, big data analysis, and the execution of down rates. Third and finally, the ICN allows us to be in contact with other young agencies which face similar problems to ours and to discuss strategies to how to deal with them, as well as to be closer to a larger number of senior agencies to learn about new methodologies or techniques for a more robust assessment of cases. All in all, the ICN represents an unbelievable opportunity for COPROCOM to receive guidance and advice, as well as to relearn and update its knowledge by means of the ICN's available tools, projects, workshops, activities, among other aids provided by the network. COPROCOM is so engaged with the ICN's mission that we also envision ourselves as an ICN ambassador facilitator, aiding, supporting, and developing other small agencies with the aim of enforcing competition policy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Viviana. You mentioned the ICN's bridging project. What would you say are some of the advantages for a young agency to partner with another more experienced ICN member?
Yes, I mainly see three advantages. First, I think that senior agencies aid us build up the necessary expertise to implement new methodologies for a robust analysis of cases and a solid enforcement of competition law. Senior agencies have also the resources and the experience to offer small agencies a customized approach which allows to tackle issue jurisdiction problems more precisely. And in the particular case of COPROCOM, Costa Rica's competition legal framework is very similar to Mexico's. So it facilitates the generation of synergies for a more efficient cooperation between our agencies.
Good, thank you. And I hope many agencies will be able to take advantage of the bridging project. It's, of course, useful for the younger agency, but I always find that the senior agency also learns a lot from that experience. So thank you. So now let's turn to David and let's hear about the Jamaican experience.
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here among this esteemed group. Now, firstly, transparency and independence are two of the Jamaica Fair Trading Commission's key values, which are ingrained in our culture because of our relative newness in several areas of competition law, one of which is merger assessments. And today I will focus my comments on M&As and one of the ICN's work products. Our law does not have expressed merger provisions. It does not provide for pre-merger notification and does not include a threshold level. We use a section in our law on agreements that may substantially lessen competition to deal with mergers. And for this reason, our public education strategy on M&As is robust. To avoid challenges, we have to ensure that our processes are transparent and complete. We have therefore had to be very clinical, accurate, and precise when investigating mergers and when speaking with the business community and the private bar. Being a part of the ICN since its early days, we are aware of the ICN's work products and we rely on several information sources. On top of our sources has been the ICN Merger Guidelines Workbook. In the early part of the last decade, we were new to M&As, and we used the workbook extensively to teach and develop ourselves in the context and core principles of mergers. We found it to be a user-friendly, practical manual which is written in easy-to-understand language. The explanations and point-by-point breakdown of the various steps makes it easy to follow. The focus of the workbook is on first principles, the rationale and practical application. Areas such as developing theories of harm, working out market definition, examining market structure and concentration, as well as other areas such as unilateral and coordinated effects, market entry and expansion, and efficiencies are sections that we use frequently, internally for assessments, as well as externally in our public education work. Also, the case studies were very instructive as we learned to navigate through investigations, things such as information that we needed, techniques to assess the relevant market. And I think we are much better for using the workbook. Thank you.
Well, that's good to hear. Now, I noticed, David, that about 2 months ago, the Jamaica FTC issued merger guidelines. So, and you mentioned the ICN's work product. I wonder if you could say a little more about how the ICN merger guidelines workbook influenced Jamaica's guidelines, especially since you mentioned you don't have pre-merger notification system.
Right, so as I said, we really started investigating mergers about 10 or so years ago. And we saw an increasing number from about 2018 to just before COVID-19 hit us. It therefore became necessary for us to develop internal guidelines, and the ICN workbook was our main source for guidance. Sections from our guidelines, including the phase 1 and phase 2 aspects, were tailored from the workbook. And because we do not have expressed merger provisions in our law, merging firms tend to question our investigation processes, and therefore we have to be clear in stating that everything that we do accords with international best practices. For example, we direct them to documents such as the ICN workbook, information from the US merger guidelines, and specifically to the case studies section, where they see for themselves that what we're doing are along the correct lines. And I think this brings comfort to them. And as I said, in February of this year, we issued our merger assessment guidelines for the first time. And already we have been receiving positive feedback from the business community and the Jamaican Bar Association. And in fact, we have been invited to talk to 2 multinational companies and have been invited to present the guidelines and discuss key issues to the Jamaican Bar Association. So I do believe that we're on the right track.
Sounds like you are, and it's very inspiring to hear how your agency worked hard to take the ICN's lessons to heart and put them into practice. Because after all, we know from the Proverbs that gebraten Tauben fliegen einem nicht ins Maul. Roasted ducks just don't fly into your mouth. Well, now we'll turn to Parret and hear the Zambian experience, and I know many in our audience will be particularly interested to hearing the experience of a younger agency such as yours, because the Proverbs teach us, jung gewohnt, alt getan. As the twig is bent, so the tree is inclined. So tell us a little about your experience, Parret.
Thank you very much, and it's quite a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation. It was quite delighting to meet a couple of colleagues that I haven't seen in quite a long time. So I'm glad to be here and to share our story. I'm going to share, of course, we have drawn a lot of inspiration from the ICN work over time, but one particular item I would like to share is what happened last year, sometime in September. If you recall, the implementation working group did a workshop. I think they were looking at hypothetical cases to do with 2 companies, Vista and Sierra. Some of your staff may have attended that workshop. So 3 of our staff attended the training. But usually what happens is after such a training session, a report is done and it's shared. But you know, reports are just reports, and very few people really go through the reports. So we thought, I think, to generate some interest in the ICN work, especially the training on demand, we then asked the colleagues who had attended the training to retrain our investigators. So, of course, a lot of inspiration was drawn from the ICN recommended practice on investigative processes. A number of issues were actually considered, issues of investigating plans, how to pick appropriate provisions, definition of the relevant market, evidence gathering, and just to check whether you need international cooperation or not. So it was very interesting because having divided the investigators into 4 groups, we gave them 3 weeks and we gave them links to go and watch the videos. You know, ICN Training on Demand is like virtual university, a lot of videos there. So we asked them to go and familiarize themselves and go through the videos and to present back. And 3 weeks later, we then did a survey to check whether that had yielded any results. And what we got was that because of the practical nature of what they had gone through, the debates within the groups that they had done, they had a much more deep understanding of what they were expected to do when they were presented with a case. And of course, your case is just as good as your investigation process. So if you don't get it right, then even a good case can end up a bad case. And so because of that, we saw quite some interest, and we have also seen that individually, our members of staff are actually going through the videos, which is helpful, and we hope that going forward, that will continue, and that will continue to be beneficial to them. Thank you.
Great. Well, it's so heartwarming to hear about the value and use of the ICN Training on Demand videos. The FTC has been involved with many colleagues in producing those, and we're always encouraging agencies to learn about them and use them, so I'm glad to hear that. And Parret, I know you were involved through the African Competition Forum and elsewhere with other agencies in Africa. Is there anything else you'd like to add about how agencies in Africa can benefit from the ICN's work?
Yeah, the ICN over time has generated a lot of information, a lot of material, a lot of good and useful recommended practices. And so for a young agency that possibly wants, I mean, David was just sharing with us that they drew a lot of inspiration in their development of the major guidelines. And so this can apply to anyone who would like to either develop a guideline or sharpen their investigative skills, maybe look at their lenience program. So there's a vast of information that is within the network, and of course, contacts, networks. I mean, I just said I'm glad to see people that I haven't seen in a long time. And so going forward and going back home, and even new people, going back, I'll keep those contacts, and when I need something, it will be very easy for me to say, hi, David, I'm looking for this particular information. Would you be able to help me? I've seen Masio from Angola, so it will be very easy as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's very nice to hear how you'll be not only enjoying but leveraging this experience. Good. So, Mary Catherine, you're the academic and the NGA on our panel, and ICN work is not only for agencies, so we'll hear how else it can be used. And Mary Catherine, you're the scholar on our panel, but the German proverbs teach die Gelehrte, die Verkehrte. Great scholars are not the shrewdest of men. But perhaps the wisdom here is that it applies only to men. So we'll still be very interested to hear your perspective.
Also vielen Dank, Randy, also für diese schöne Einladung and yeah, the surprising proverbs that you learn when you come to this particular session. And of course, as a non-governmental advisor, I particularly, and I greatly appreciate being invited to participate on a plenary session. And I want to acknowledge that, and I pay tribute to the people who organize that, because it's indicative of the inclusivity of this tremendous and unique network. But down to my pitch. I've been asked to offer a short account of some personal experience as a full-time legal academic of ICN products. Now, as we all know, ICN offers an accessible trove of multiple resources, and I'd just like to touch on how a few of them are very helpful to people who do the work that I do. Training on demand modules, as we've heard already today, are of course very effective learning tools for several reasons. Of course, their quality, their depth, and the range of their subject coverage, which grows and grows like Topsy, and that is to be commended as well. But I suggest that they have an additional value for us teachers. When students get to see the faces and hear the voices of the many world-class participants in the training on demand modules, then I find that the students are better disposed to engaging more deeply with those participants' publications, which I ask my students to read and study as part of my course. So thank you for that. I can also say thank you to you for your training on demand modules, which are, let's call them the practical ones, the hands-on types of issues which are tackled there. Because obviously this then allows us teachers to offer a more authentic experiential learning opportunity to our students within the confines of a classroom. And that, of course, is particularly important if you are engaged or if you're employed by an institution where the resources, the financial resources, really wouldn't allow you to create your own type of simulations. So that's the teaching part. Then assessment, this is topical actually for a lot of students this week. For some courses, students are allowed to, or required to, conduct a case study, but they get to choose the market or the antitrust agency. And what I find is that the ICN product broadens the range of their field of inquiry, and it helps me to nudge, to encourage them to broaden their focus beyond their home or other well-known jurisdictions, the large ones. And I think that's one of the themes, the sub-themes of this panel, is we're shining a light more diffusely across the world. So the ICN website, just to be a bit nuts and bolts about it, actually has a global map of its members. And so all the student has to do is to click on the geographical location or to go through the alphabetical filter of the name of the country and click on it. And that brings them directly to a link to the website of the agency. Now that's extremely helpful if you are trying to find out about an agency whose name does not actually include the name of the country. So not every agency is the ACCC. So that's, I think, a very user-friendly aspect and indicates the thought that went into the design of the website. Now, for the students who are embarking on a research dissertation or thesis, I always direct them to ICN website. I mean, this is a tremendous starting point for what we call the horizon scanning, trying to get a feel for what's hot. And what they can do is they can look at the annual conferences, they can look at the working group workshops and kind of find out what are the knotty issues. And then when they've framed their research question, then they can further then access the document library and read those reports, David, as well as the recommendations, the work plans, the submissions from members and from NGAs, and hopefully use that in their research. Almost finished. On the point of research, look, it goes without saying, lots of people, I see you in this room, people who are watching us on live, scholars have found the ICN itself, the ICN products, an absolutely rich vein for their own research. And it is, as I started out by saying, a unique venture. And my own particular interest is on this whole idea of, we won't call it convergence, but we might call it eliminating divergence by using soft law in a voluntary sort of way. And I think that's very inspiring. I think it's very interesting. And I would suggest that that's of interest, not just to people and scholars who are interested in competition law or antitrust, but other fields of law, maybe environmental law. So I hope this, and I hope it was brief, but academics, we talk and we talk. That's why I have the notes, so that I won't talk too long. I wanted to give you a flavour of how ICN products may be useful to those who teach and/or research competition law in any jurisdiction, but actually in every jurisdiction. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary Catherine. And please say Andreas after. I think we may have an opening for ICN spokesperson. I think this is a great demonstration of how NGAs not only can inform and contribute to our work, but can help bring it to others to learn and understand it as well. So thank you for that. Before we close, I just want to encourage everyone to stop by the ICN Open House, which will be in the event space during the lunch break tomorrow. There you can learn more about the ICN and its tools and resources, including these training on demand videos that you've heard about, and how you can get involved. And we also welcome you to share your implementation story. So stop by the open house and create a short video with your experience. Well, I'd like to leave you with two proverbs that together remind me of the ethos of the ICN. On the first hand, andere Länder, andere Sitten. Every country has its customs. And that reminds us that we all come from different cultures with different rules and traditions, and it's very important to honor and respect those differences. But at the same time, we remember that überall geht des Morgens die Sonne auf. In every country, the sun rises in the morning. So we have our differences, but I believe that there is even more that unites us. And as we implement the learning of the ICN and through its valuable resources, I know we will become even more united in accomplishing our shared missions. So we come to the end, and you've heard enough of my bad German, I'm sorry. So this time I leave you with the final German proverb, but this time in English, is everything has an end, but a sausage has two. So let us thank our excellent panelists, and I wish everyone a great rest of the conference and this day in Berlin.
Oh,
okay. Extremely well done.
Okay.
Randy, it was great.
Okay,
and your
great.
German is